Hey guys, Gijoe here. Welcome back to my workshop next to my bunker here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I finally decided to go ahead and start to finish this table out. So if you've been watching my videos, you know that I've been working on this custom tabletop. And I need to start finishing this out, getting it primed, sanded, painted, puttied, stained, and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully I can get this done by Thursday because I have a special guest coming in, which we'll talk about that later. But so what I've done is, of course, I brought my table in here. It's very light. I just got it sitting on a couple of sawhorses that I made out of 2x4s. And I simply just took my air compressor and kind of blew out any dust and sawdust and little particles like that. And then I applied the primer. This is the same primer I used on my pieces, recommended by Sire Blood, and so I just took me about 20, maybe 30 minutes, and I just kind of did a light coat all the way through. This stuff dries pretty quickly, so it's actually already kind of dry to the touch. But what I'm going to do next, after this completely dries, I might wait here about an hour. And next is I'm going to sand it, and I'll show you my process for that. So this technique is what I just learned from Sire Blood, and all I did was watch his videos and kind of wrote down the steps, and I'm going to kind of duplicate it and see how it turns out. So stay tuned. Next up will be sanding. All right, guys, so the primer is dry here, so now we're going to be on to my first sanding, and I'm going to use, I think Sire Blood says 120 grit. I don't have 120 grit. I've got 150 grit, and I've got 80. And I've got some pretty uneven areas, so I think I'm going to start with 80 to get some of these areas a little bit even. And then I'm going to come back over it with 150, kind of take out some of the scratches. So I'm going to kind of, got some 80 grit on my orbital sander. I'm going to go around this baby and kind of get some of these areas even. As you can see right here, that's not that even. So I got to get that kind of looking smooth, or at least smoother than it is. So we'll give this a go, and I'll show you what it looks like after. Okay, just finished the initial sanding with 80 grit paper just to kind of get the unevenness. And as you can see right here, it's already a lot more, I'm already feeling the smoothness of this. Whereas these pieces I put in were kind of different heights. And so now that all the edges are relatively the same height. So now I'm going to throw on some 150 grit. And I'm going to go back over this, fine tune this, smooth this out. And then I'm going to get inside these side rails here like this, all the way up like that, going on the side rails and here, all the way around. And then and we'll do that, and after that, I think we're going to putty it. You know, all the nail holes and stuff, we'll putty those up. Okay, I just finished going over this with the 150 grit with my orbital sander. Now I'm going to take some 220 grit, and this is going to be done by hand. I'm going to kind of go over this, feel the smoothness, do this kind of stuff, and then of course get inside all these little boxes, rails, and make sure, you know, those are smooth inside of these rails as well. And all right, so this will take me, I don't know, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. So I'll do that, and I'll be back with you on the next step. So again, I'm doing hand sanding with 220 grit paper, lightly hand sanding, just making sure everything feels nice and smooth before we go to the next step. Okay, guys, I've gone over with 220 grit by hand, and I smooth everything out, nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. So I did 3 sandings. Again, I did 80 grit first because I had some unevenness. Then I did 150. Both of those using my orbital sander, and then I went back on with hand and did 220 grit, nice and smooth. And then I just blew it off. I was going to use my air compressor, but there was so much dust and leaves are flying in because of the fall, so I used my actually leaf blower. And here they come again. But so anyways, I'm going to close this garage door, and now I'm going to start using this Dry Dex spackling putty. And I'm just going to go in and put little dabs over the nail holes, over these little creases. See, this is smooth, but you can see gaps. So what I want to do is I want to fill in those gaps. So I'm going to go around the entire board, fill all the nail holes, all these little seams where wood is joining other wood. and do that. And then afterwards, I'll come back and hand sand those areas with 220 grit sandpaper again. All right, so we'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've just gone over the entire board. I'm gonna do a little double check here, but again, I use this stuff here. I think I got it at either Home Depot or Lowe's, can't remember. Dry deck spackling. It's pink. It goes on pink, and when it dries and it's ready to be sanded, it turns white. So as you can see, some of the areas I've already done have already turned white, so I can go ahead and do my hand sanding with 220 grit. So essentially, I went through, as you can see, and did all these little creases and stuff where wood was, where I cut pieces of wood and put in little, little blocks to make it. Hopefully that'll look like one piece, like I shaved or cut an actual hole out of a block of wood. And then I had to go on the insides here, and where I took my pin nailer and went pop, 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 pop to get this rail to stick up there. Had to go and put a little dab in there. All the pin nail holes covered. The cup areas were a little bit tricky. Had to make sure you get that. And then if you notice on the bottom, there is this is the plywood underneath, and here's the 1.5 by 3/4 piece of wood on there. So I put a little bit in the crease so that there we go. So that hopefully when I sand this out and paint it, you won't be able to see, a line all the way around the bottom where the wood attached to the plywood. But and just so you know, as Sire says, you can only use this stuff if you intend on painting. If you're going to stain, this is not going to work. This will not take stain, but this will take paint. So I'm going to do one more look over this, make sure I have this all done, and then if everything is a go, I'm going to take my 220 grit and just kind of start sanding this a little bit by hand, sanding off the spackling. All right, guys, I have finished sanding after filling with the putty, the spackling, whatever, and just to show you an idea, I don't know if you can see with the sun here, but you can see how all those little cracks and crevices that were between these blocks of wood that I nailed in here now are filled with that little white dried spackling. And that's nice and smooth. I've sanded it. So now I'm getting ready to put the primer on. And after that, I'll lightly sand the primer, and then I'll get ready to put down some paint, my first coat of white paint. So you can see why we put in the filler, the spackling. So that looks really good. I'm very, very happy. And the table is nice and smooth. And I may have missed a few spots and all that, but this table is going to look weathered, kind of old, vintage. And so, I do want to have a little bit of character on the table. So something like, what was that? There was a notch in the table over here. Let me find it. Well, I thought for sure I had a notch. Anyway, but sometimes notches and little dings on the table can add a little bit of character to the table. Oh, here it is, right here. So like this is a little notch groove. I decided not to try to fill that, because maybe add a little bit of character, especially once I put some, once I dip it. So, all right, so we're all puttied up and sanded. Now I'm going to put down the second coat of primer, let that dry, head off to do a few other things, and then I'll come and do a light hand sanding just to take any of the grit off from the primer. And then we're ready to paint this booger. All right, about 20 minutes later, we're all primed up. I'm gonna let this dry. Sorry about the sun. It's coming through my garage, my shop windows and my garage door. But you can see everything's primed up. This is the second layer, so I'm gonna let this dry, go do a few other things. And then either later tonight or maybe tomorrow, I'll do a light hand sand with 220 or maybe 320 just to take some of the little grit that sometimes primer might that might lay on top of the wood once you spray with primer. And then after that, it's ready to start putting on the first coat of white paint. So just getting a look here, you can see with the primer on there how, yeah, you can barely see that there are pieces of wood there. But when the cup thing is in there and you're looking down on top, it's going to look as if this was just cut out of a big block of wood, which is going to be pretty nice. So I'm excited. Again, this is a shout out to Sire Blood. This is his technique, what he did to his tables, and I'm just trying to reproduce it. And so far, so good. I'm very happy. So we'll be back a little bit later with the. I won't show you the sanding, but I'll put on the first coat of white paint. And by the way, it's the same white I'm using on my custom piece boxes. So it's this heirloom white, again at Home Depot. It was like what, $4 a can, something like that. So I got 4 or 5 cans just to make sure, because I'll probably end up putting at least 2 coats on this thing. So all right, guys, we'll see you on the next item, which will be painting. All right, guys, I've just hand sanded with my 220 grit sandpaper. Boom, right here. So this thing's feeling nice and smooth. I've also taken my air gun and blown all the little dust that I've made out of this. Running my hand along here, so it feels, really good. If you find a spot, you can just kind of redo it real quick. But I want to show you, give you an idea of what this looks like. I threw the cup in here. Of course, I just pushed it in there, but you get an idea how, you can hardly even see that these pieces of wood were put together. A little bit here, but that's not a big deal. It's going to add a little character, make it look like it's an old weathered table. So all in all, the seams right here are in pretty good shape. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. So I'm getting ready now to take my heirloom white and put on my first coat, heirloom white. So I'll do that here and maybe show you the ending process, and then let this dry overnight, and then continue on with the process. All right, I got the first layer or 2 layers or so on there, and what I did was I went very light the first time around, of course using my heirloom white here. I got it at Home Depot for about $4 a can. I went very, very light, dusting. It can kind of look about like this, my first pass. Kind of went all around the table, of course, different angles. Shot from this side, from that side, this way on the tractor, that way on the tractor, all those kinds of things. And then I kind of went all the way around, and it was just a light dusting. And then it dried, at least a touch fairly quickly. So then I kind of went around and did a second light coat so that I didn't have too much, I wasn't putting wet paint on top of wet paint. So I'm not a professional painter, but, I wanted that first coat to dry. And so this is after about two dustings. And you can still see plenty of spots where there's some primer showing through, which I'm not worried about. So I just wanted to get a good base coat. I'm gonna let this dry overnight. And today's, dry overnight, and wait about 24 hours, and about this time tomorrow, I'll come down here, maybe lightly sand with some 400 grit, put maybe a 3rd coat on, and then 24 hours after that, I'll see if it needs any more touch up, and we'll go from there. So this is what it looks like. Okay, now you might be wondering, well, why did I paint this and then not these? Because these are going to be dice trays, and that's going to have some leather and felt down there. This is actually going to be the tray where I put all my flight stands and my my bank, IPCs, and the IPC chips and all that kind of stuff. So when I pull those out, I wanted to have a nice looking white base there. So get a kind of idea of what this looks like, and like I said, let this dry overnight, 24 hours, and we'll come here and put our 3rd coat on. All right, we'll be back. All right, guys, so I think I may have forgotten to video one of my steps, but not a big deal. But what you're looking at right here is the final coat, and I forgot to do a short vid on how I got to here. And what I did was I hand sanded the table from the last video you saw with 400 grit sandpaper. Just kind of lightly went over it like this on the inside just to make it nice and smooth, to get off any of the granules from the paint. And then of course I put on my final coat of paint. So this is final coat. Everything's looking really good. I don't see any primer showing. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to make and paint this little victory point tracker right here. And of course here's a victory point roundel. These will be set right here. And I'm going to spray paint this red so that you can see, you know, where you are in respect to how many victory points you've achieved. So you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. But first of all, what I did was I taped this off, and I used frog tape. Don't want to use the blue tape. From what Sarge says, this is a little more expensive. I don't know, $6, $7 a roll, maybe somewhere in there. It might even be more, I don't know, but this is well worth it because this allows you to peel off and get some nice, clean, straight lines. So I've taped this off. I've put some things here for make sure I don't overshoot. So I'm going to use paprika from Home Depot. Again, $4 a can. And this is the same stuff I used for my Japanese box. So let me shake this up and I'll spray paint. Be right back. All right, here we go. So as you notice, I put the tape on the inside of the rails because I want the paint to be only on the bottom. So I've taken my time to make sure I tape it up really good. And then I'm just going to kind of, I'm not really watching the camera, so I'm not sure if this is in there or not. Just kind of a really quick dust. And that'll probably be about it right there. Yeah. All right. So what I'll do is I'm gonna let that dry for about 3 minutes, and I'm gonna peel off the tape, and you should see some nice clean lines. So we'll come back to that in a second. All right, guys, just peeled off the tape, so you can see what I'm talking about. This is kind of the red zone, the victory points, and so as you slide roundels down here, it'll kind of let you know how close you are to getting to the end of your required red zone or victory point requirement. So. Yeah, I only let this dry for about 3 minutes. I still wanted the paint to be a little bit wet so that when I pulled up the frog tape, gave a nice clean line, as you can see right there, and on the inside rail. Okay, so I only have 2 more steps to do, guys, and we're done. This is getting exciting, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to work. I'm going to let this dry all day today, and then later on tonight, I'm going to lightly sand with 800 grit just to make this really, really nice and smooth. I'm going to sand this with 800 grit, and then it's going to be time to dip the table to stain it, make it all weathered. So we're getting really close. I'm excited. So it looks like I'm definitely going to have this baby done for my special guest that's coming in later this week. So we'll see you on the next step. Well, guys, it's getting exciting. We are here on the last step of our painting process. After this, I just have to put on some stickers for numbers for the income tracker and all that, but that's no big deal. So I didn't videotape this, but I took some 800 grit sandpaper, as I talked about in the last little clip, and I just kind of went over with my hand, nice and easy like that. Just kind of, not much at all by hand. Just to kind of smooth out, get off any granules off the top. So I've gone over the entire board. You know, it took me about 20-30 minutes. And so now we are on the dipping process. So for the dip, I am using the same dip that I use for my pieces, Minwax Poly Shade Honey. It's the Honey Poly Shade in Satin. And I got this at Lowe's. It was $13. And so it's the same stuff I use on my pieces. So I simply have a couple rags. I've got my wiping rag, or I'm gonna dip, put the polyurethane on, and then I've got 3 clean rags, and these are microfiber rags, by the way. And that's gonna be wipe on. So you got kind of wipe on, wipe off, wax on, wax off. So I'm not gonna videotape this whole entire table, but I just wanna show you my process here on this one little spot. And let me zoom back out. There we go. So I'll just kind of show you what I'm doing here. And you don't want to put this stuff on the entire table at once. You want to do it in small little sections because you don't want this stuff to stay and dry on here. So basically you just kind of wipe it on. I'll just do this little section here. Okay, I'm wiping it on. Get it down in here. Okay, and the stuff will run, especially when it's new. It'll run pretty good. So you have to kind of make sure, and if it runs and dries, you're gonna get like long streaks. So, get a little more down in there. Getting in these corners can be kind of tough. So sometimes you have to get like a paintbrush, which I don't have one on me right now, but I might have to do that. So, all right, so I've got it on. And let me go ahead and wipe this baby off. So you do that, and you wipe it off, and what it's doing is it's taking this white, just putting this nice little glaze on the top, making it look like it's not a stark white. Just a little bit of a glaze. You see you have to wipe kind of fast because it's, I may have put too much on at once, because it starts to kind of thicken up pretty darn quickly. And when it does, it's hard to get off. So I may have gone a little bit overboard here. Put a little pressure on it. There we go. Okay. Now I'm not too worried about these insides part here because it's all going to be layered in leather. So what I'll do is I'll get this wiped off, and then I'll kind of take the camera off, give you a close-up of what it looks like, and let you see and compare that to an area that has not been touched. And then I'll finish out the table. I'll come back on and show you the end result. How about that? And you know, this is all preference. If you want it lighter, wipe more of it off. If you want a darker hue, just don't wipe as much off, or put a second coat on or something, you know. All right. You gotta be careful because, you know, if you put your finger in here, put your finger in there and you don't wipe it off, you'll get a fingerprint, kind of like cement, and it'll be stuck on there. All right, so I'm gonna take this off. I don't know if you can see this. Let me take this off real quick here. Sorry for the... So, just gives it a nice little aged hue. You compare that to the brightness of this. Just kind of turns it into a slight cream off-white a little bit. And you kind of see the detail down in here. So see that little corner? I'm gonna need to get a brush and get that corner dab in there. And all right, so I'm gonna finish this out, and I'll come back and show you what the finished product looks like. All right, guys, well, I have finished the dipping process, and I went ahead and put in the last thing, which was the my stickers that I made with my label maker for my income tracker, my technology tracker if I play BBR rules, and I went ahead and put the felt in for my dice trays. So the only thing I have left to do is put in the leather here. So I thought I'd show you what the final product looks like. And as you can see, if you've seen any of my other videos before, you know that I already did my Japanese piece box, and I weathered it, and I did my IPC chip tray, and I weathered it. So as you can see, everything kind of goes together now. You've got weathered boxes with a weathered map, with a weathered table, weathered, the pieces are weathered. So everything kind of flows and goes together, all right? So let's just kind of take a fly over here and let you see. One thing I want to show you is, you know, the cool thing about putting on the dip on the table is it's just whatever your preference is. You know, if you want it darker, you can cake it on, not rub off as much. If you want it lighter, just you don't put as much on, or you just make sure to wipe a lot of it off. So the tricky thing is being consistent all the way through, or at least as close as possible. And you'll see a couple spots here where it's just got a nice glaze. I've got the little edging in here, which I wanted, but then what I did was I got it too dark here. And what I did was I after I showed you my little example here in the corner, I put too much on at once, and by the time I got to this section, it was already drying. So this is a good example of, if you put too much on and you can't get over there to wipe it off quickly enough, it's going to get darker like this, which this is not really what I wanted, but I didn't freak out because that's really going to be covered with my little accessory trays there. So after that little bitty mistake, I made sure that through the rest of the board, I just did little chunks, little, maybe about 10 or 12 inches, and wiped off, and then I just kind of moved down. So it took me probably close to 2 hours, simply because I really made sure to take my time and do it in small blotches. And then, of course, getting all the stuff in here and wiping it out of here kind of took some time. So, and I wanted to make sure not to get this caked on too much. So, just going to do a fly over here, let you see what we got going on. But the table's all good to go for my special guest who's going to be coming in on Thursday here in a couple days. And that's the income tracker there. So the table is good to go. It's dried up. Everything is good. The only thing I have to do, like I said, is to put the leather in here, which I may or may not have that done by the time my special guest gets here on Thursday. So, but nevertheless, you kind of see what the final product is, guys. So I hope you like it, and I hope this process and video was helpful to show you how I did it, just in case you're interested in doing this project. And even if you don't do things exactly like this, maybe some of the techniques here can inspire or spawn some ideas maybe for your own table. And you can take some of these concepts and apply it to whatever creativity or creative idea that you can come up with for your table. So, okay. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. All right. Appreciate it.